My friend Nick lived with Anna, a beautiful and cheerful girl. No, they were not a couple, which he secretly, undoubtedly dreamed of. They just rented an apartment together. It was a spacious 2-bedroom apartment with a large kitchen in a great area of the city. It's not far from the university where we all studied. Unlike the beautiful and popular Anna, who, in addition to excellent studies, managed to do gymnastics and participated in all events, Nick was a typical quiet nerd. But this is purely outwardly, because he was not an excellent student, but rather a C student, and he had no friends except me and Anna. With us, he revealed a completely different side. He showed a sparkling sense of humor, well-read, and even a penchant for adventures. So we were friends for several years, starting from the first year. And everything would have been wonderful if it hadn't been for their strange neighbor, a tall, thin man with an eyesore and dressed in some kind of black voluminous clothes. He scared the hell out of all of us, especially Anna. Several times, he waited for the girl in the entrance and tried to talk. Then he ambushed Nick, grabbed him by the sleeve, and began to whisper hoarsely in his ear to be careful, because his neighbor was not a human at all, but some kind of demon and other crap. Nick barely escaped. We even called the police, but they just waved us off. Then we decided to deal with him ourselves. We rang the doorbell for a long time, until I accidentally nudged her with my elbow, and she opened herself, inviting us into the dark, uncomfortable apartment of a psycho. This dwelling looked more like a den than anything else. The walls were covered with torn wallpaper, pieces of which hung down to the worn linoleum. In one room, the windows were broken, and somehow sealed with cardboard, which did not save from a terrible draft. At the same time, the apartment itself was very damp and musty. There were no cupboards or furniture at all, just a pile of rags in the corner, and a wooden chair from Soviet times. There were creepy photographs on the walls. In black and white, one showed a girl whose face was distorted with wild horror. The mouth was unnaturally wide open, and some kind of cloud was escaping from it. On the other, the girl was lying in an inanimate position, her neck twisted violently, while smiling broadly. It became very creepy for us. This is a real maniac. We quickly took out our phones and began photographing everything strange that we saw in this creepy den, and everything was strange, starting with furniture, or rather its absence, and ending with a whole arsenal of cold weapons in the kitchen, instead of kitchen utensils and groceries. There was no refrigerator either. How he lived and what he ate was unclear. But the most disgusting thing in the apartment was the jar with some maggot-like worms that we found on the windowsill in the kitchen. I almost threw up, and Nick, judging by his white face, too. We preferred to quickly escape from there, and decided not to tell our friend anything yet, so as not to worry her even more. She was already terribly intimidated by the creepy neighbor. She just started shaking at the very mention of him. Anna was already waiting for us in the hallway. "Did you guys talk to him? What is it?" she asked impatiently. We replied that we had been ringing for a long time, but no one answered the door. Then we went to dinner, and almost until morning we sat in the kitchen, animatedly discussing the oddities of the neighbor, the institute teachers, and the upcoming session. A week later, our institute was shocked by the terrible news. Anna's boyfriend was brutally murdered. Yes, of course, she had a boyfriend, a handsome and athletic man, matching Anna herself. His body was found near the house. His throat was simply torn out. We learned about this later from the parents of the deceased guy. His face was distorted in terrible death agony. He even had to be buried in a closed coffin. Almost the whole of our institute was at the funeral, including the teachers, except for his girlfriend Anna. This surprised us a lot. His mother told him with resentment in her voice that Anna never even called after his death, did not ask how they were doing. The girl explained to us that she was very worried about the loss, and simply could not be among people. She didn't leave her room for several days and didn't eat anything, so people's accusations were unfair. Everyone experiences grief in their own way, I thought. After a few days, Anna returned to her usual lifestyle and seemed to become even more beautiful. Under the reproachful glances of her classmates, she continued to go to her sports classes and rehearsals. She didn't seem to care what people thought of her. She was so good that if it hadn't been for Nick, who was hopelessly in love with her, I would definitely have tried my luck. There probably wasn't a guy in our stream who didn't want the same thing. Nick, on the contrary, somehow drooped, completely stopped joking, and spent almost all his time in our institute library. It began to seem to me that he didn't want to go home anymore. It seemed very strange to me, because he used to rush home as fast as he could after couples to see his neighbor as soon as possible. When I saw Nick again at the university, I bullied him and forced him to tell me everything. He looked even worse than usual, deep shadows under his eyes, a dull look, and he also had tremors in his hands, like an old man or a neurotic. I was shocked. We sat down in the park, not far from the institute dorm where I lived, and I got ready to listen. He immediately refused, and then burst into tears. I didn't know what to do. Nick grabbed my cigarettes and tried to light them with shaking hands. Nick has never smoked. What could have happened? I was just wondering. Joe, Nick began, you know that I've been in love with Anna for a long time. Since our first meeting. So you decided to confess to her, and she refused? I interrupted him. If only, my friend smiled mirthlessly and continued in a broken voice. I understood that she would never perceive me as an object of love, and therefore I was content with the role of a friend. But you know, we had a lot of fun together, we understood each other perfectly. And after the murder of her boyfriend, after his death, everything changed. I went into Anna's room once. I knocked, but she didn't hear me. I saw that she was rocking and purring in a strange way, you know, like birds, and her mouth was covered in blood and feathers of some kind. There were feathers everywhere. She sat like a demon, staring with glassy eyes at one point. When she was not at home, I went into the room and saw the remains of a pigeon near the bed. She was eating a bird. He almost screamed. Then this neighbor also threw a note under my door. It said she's switched to humans. Be careful. I decided to go to him again. The door was open again, and the neighbor was lying on the floor. He had a huge wound on his shoulder. I wanted to call an ambulance, but he wouldn't let me. He said that the doctors would not help him anymore, and he did not have time for hospitals. He needed to destroy the monster before there were more victims. He told me that Anna is not human. Her body is just a shell stolen from a murdered girl, and this creature feeds on human fear and blood, of course. But just to kill, she's not interested. Before that, you need to feed on the horror of the victim. She also feeds well on any human negativity, envy, hatred, complexes, failures. And you know, I thought then that it was true. The worse it was for me, the more my neighbor flourished. I wasn't always a C student. I passed the first session almost perfectly, and Anna almost got kicked out for failing. And then she came up to me and offered me an apartment option. That's when I started dating a girl, remember? So, as soon as I moved into that apartment, our relationship immediately came to naught, and it wasn't about jealousy of Anna. No, I just stopped being interested in my girlfriend right away. And then everything in my life began to decline. My studies stopped being given to me, my energy went away, and I stopped running in the morning. I threw away my gym membership. I just lost interest in life. Everything revolved only around our life. And I myself, since we moved in together, have never had a relationship. I've never been lucky. Nothing else happens in my life. It's like I'm an observer. Another neighbor, by the way, his name is Felix, or rather his name was. But more about that later. He said that I should take a picture of her, and then I would understand everything and believe him. Then Felix asked me to keep it, giving me this amulet for the last time, and Nick took out a pendant in the form of a hexagonal star on a black cord from his breast pocket. The pendant looked like the Jewish Star of David, but some pentagram-like signs were applied all over its surface. So you took a picture of her? I asked. Yes, that same evening, I took a surreptitious picture of her. There was nothing in the photo, just the outline of a head with red eyes and a huge mouth. But if you look at it for a long time and have some imagination, my friend replied. After that, I started watching Anna more closely, and you know, I noticed a lot of oddities. Sometimes I could smell rotting from her, and even when she looked in the mirror, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the reflection of some vile creature instead of Anna, not even a human. It was a bald creature with no nose and a huge mouth. Something similar to what I saw in the photo back then. And then a neighbor was killed. I didn't tell you. I just couldn't. I was very scared. I found him near the elevator. His throat was torn open and Anna was standing next to him. She was looking at him and smiling, like a predator over its prey. When she saw me, she immediately changed her expression to a scared one and began to cry. But I didn't believe her anymore. That was the last time I saw my friend. Anna is also missing. Nick was an orphan, and no one was looking for him. Our dean's office didn't make a fuss either. Moreover, he was already among the first candidates for expulsion. And Anna, as I heard at the dean's office, took her documents to transfer to another institute. Cursing myself for my cowardice, I never gathered the strength to call her. I dialed the number several times, but I dropped it at the last moment. But then, she texted me herself, "Hi, it's been a long time. Nick's gone, but that doesn't stop us from being friends, does it?" I blocked her number with shaking hands. Yes, I'm a coward and a scoundrel, but I don't want to become fourth on Anna's list, or whoever she really is.